The morning mist hung thick over St. Lo like a burial shroud. It was June 12th, 1944, and the sun had not yet burned through the fog that clung to the hedgerows of Normandy. In the cramped belly of a Sherman tank, Staff Sergeant Whittaker Brennan sat hunched over a scrap of paper, his calloused farmer's hands gripping a pencil worn down to a stub. 28 years old, 6 days in France, already writing his 23rd last letter home. The paper trembled slightly, not from fear, from the idle rumble of the engine, 30 tons of American steel waiting in the shadows of a sunken lane. Witt's handwriting was careful, deliberate, the way a man writes when he knows the words might be all that's left of him. "Dear Ma," he wrote, "if you're reading this, I'm already gone." He paused, crossed it out, started again. "Dear Ma, the farm ready for harvest. I've been thinking about the south field. You'll want to—" The words stopped. His jaw tightened. Around him, the Sherman's interior breathed with the quiet tension of 4 other men trying not to think about what dawn would bring. Metal creaked. Someone shifted weight. The smell of oil and sweat and yesterday's fear filled the compartment like a living thing. Witt folded the letter without finishing it. 23 letters, 23 battles. 23 times he'd written goodbye and somehow lived to write another. He tucked the paper into his helmet liner next to the other 22 he'd never sent. His mother wouldn't get this one either, not if he had anything to say about it. Through the narrow vision slit, the hedgerows stood like fortress walls, dense, impenetrable. The French called this country the bocage. The Germans called it perfect. The Americans just called it hell. But Whit Brennan, who'd spent 26 years studying dirt and weather and the stubborn patience of Appalachian soil, looked at those hedgerows and saw something different. He saw a trap waiting to be sprung. The memory came unbidden, as it always did in the moments before battle. 5 days ago, June 7th. The day Witt learned that steel and courage weren't enough. They'd been advancing through open fields near Carentan when the first Panther appeared. It materialized like something from a nightmare, a massive German tank with a gun barrel that seemed to stretch halfway to Berlin. 45 tons of sloped armor and Krupp steel, the kind of machine that made American tank crews whisper prayers and check their escape hatches twice. Lieutenant Patterson had been in command that day. Good man, by the book. He'd ordered the platoon forward in a textbook assault formation, 5 Shermans in a line advancing across the field toward the distant tree line, where intelligence said there might be German infantry. Intelligence was wrong. The Panther's gun spoke first. 1 shot, a sound like God himself ripping canvas. The shell crossed 800 yards in a heartbeat and punched through the lead Sherman's frontal armor as if it were made of tin foil. The tank didn't just stop, it erupted. Orange flame belched from every hatch and seam. The turret lifted 3 feet in the air on a column of smoke and ammunition, cooking off in a chain reaction that turned the interior into a crematorium. Witt had seen it from his position in the second tank. Saw the commander's hatch flip open. Saw a man try to climb out his uniform already burning. Saw him make it halfway before the second explosion pulled him back down into the fire. Nobody got out of that tank. Patterson ordered a flanking maneuver. It was the right call tactically. Textbook. 2 tanks left, 2 right, spread the Germans' fire, close the distance, get shots on the weaker side armor. But there were 2 Panthers, not 1. The second Panther had been waiting in the tree line, hull down, invisible until it fired. Its shell caught the 3rd Sherman broadside at 600 yards. Penetration. The tank slewed sideways, track shredded, and then the ammunition went up, and it was burning too. Witt's driver, Silas Crane, had screamed something. Witt couldn't remember what. The radio was chaos. Patterson's voice cutting through, ordering retreat, ordering smoke, ordering something, anything to break contact. The Panthers fired again. Methodical, professional. The fourth Sherman exploded. 3 tanks gone in 90 seconds. WWII's Sherman had been fourth in line, now second, still standing. Patterson's was first. Patterson ordered covering fire, ordered WWII to fall back, ordered the gunner to aim for the closest Panther's tracks. The German tank fired first. WWII remembered the sound, a metallic shriek like 1,000 knives dragging across steel. The shell hit their frontal armor at an angle not quite perpendicular. It didn't penetrate, but the impact felt like God's fist. The whole tank rang like a bell. Corporal Jasper Cole, the gunner, was thrown against the breech. Blood exploded from his nose. The loader, a kid named Roberts, vomited from the concussion. "Bail out," Patterson's voice over the radio. "Brennan, bail out, their reload." The transmission ended in static and screaming. WWII had looked through the periscope and seen Patterson's Sherman take a round through the turret ring, the weakest point. The Panther's gunner knew exactly where to aim. The shell went in and found the ammunition racks, and Patterson's tank became a bonfire with men trapped inside it. The radio carried their screams for 7 seconds before it went silent. Silas had already thrown the Sherman into reverse engine howling. WWII grabbed Jasper, who was dazed and bleeding, and dragged him toward the hatch. The driver's compartment was filling with smoke. Something was burning, maybe wiring, maybe worse. They bailed into a drainage ditch as German machine gun fire chewed up the earth around them. WWII had Jasper under one arm, the man's weight dead and heavy. Blood poured from a gash on Jasper's forehead, mixing with the mud and the French rainwater in the ditch bottom. Behind them, their Sherman burned. 5 tanks, 4 lost, 1 crew surviving. Patterson's voice still echoed in WWII's ears, the screaming, the static, the silence. That night, Jasper had trembled in the aid station while a medic stitched his forehead. His hands wouldn't stop shaking. He kept apologizing over and over for missing the shot, for not firing faster, for not being good enough. WWII had sat next to him and said nothing. What was there to say? The Panther had been 800 yards away. The Sherman's 75mm gun could barely scratch German armor at that range. They'd been outgunned, outranged, and outmatched from the first second. The Germans had a nickname for the Sherman. They called it the Ronson, like the cigarette lighter, because it always lit on the first strike. WWII had heard them say it over the radio, laughing in German while Patterson burned. Jasper spoke enough German to translate. His father had immigrated from Bremen in 1920. The language had been a family thing. A connection to the old country before the war made German surnames something to whisper instead of speak. They said we light up easy," Jasper had muttered, staring at his shaking hands. "They're laughing at us, Sarge. They think we're a joke." WWII had looked at those hands, looked at the kid who'd just watched men burn alive, looked at the bandage leaking blood. "They won't be laughing next time," WWII had said quietly. Jasper had glanced up, confusion in his eyes. "Sarge, we can't beat them, not straight up. Their tanks are better, their guns are better. We don't fight straight up." "What?" WWII had stood, joints aching, mud caking his boots. "Panthers need distance, need clear sight lines, need room to use that big gun." He'd looked out at the Normandy hedgerows visible in the distance, thick and ancient and impenetrable. "We don't give them room." The lesson had started the next morning. June 8th. While Jasper recovered in the field hospital and the division mourned its dead, WWII had found a French resistance fighter named Marcel, who knew the bocage, like some men knew scripture. Marcel was 60, maybe older, with hands gnarled from decades of farming, the same stubborn Norman soil his grandfather had farmed. He spoke broken English with a thick accent that turned every sentence into a puzzle. But he knew the land. "The hedgerows," Marcel said, walking Whit through the maze of sunken lanes. "Very old. Roman times. Good for defense, yes, but defense works both ways. If you cannot see them, they cannot see you either." Whit studied them the way he'd studied ridgelines back in Appalachia. Every fold of earth, every choke point, every place where sight lines vanished. It was a simple truth, obvious even. But in that moment, standing in a sunken lane with walls of earth 8 feet high and vegetation so dense it blocked out the sky, Whit saw the entire battlefield differently. The Sherman couldn't outgun a Panther, couldn't out-armor it, couldn't outrun it in open ground. But in the bocage, none of that mattered. In the bocage, the Panther's advantages disappeared. Its long gun couldn't shoot what it couldn't see. Its thick armor didn't help when ambushed from the side at 30 yards. Its speed meant nothing in lanes too narrow to turn around. Whit had spent 3 days studying every sunken lane within 5 miles of Saint-Lô. Marcel showed him the paths, the angles, the places where the hedgerows created natural funnels. Places where a tank column would have to go single file. Places where visibility dropped to 20 yards. Places where a patient man could wait. On June 11th, Whit's new crew had assembled. Jasper was back, forehead still bandaged, hands still shaking but functional. The loader Roberts was gone. The concussion from June 7th had left him with seizures. The medics sent him to the rear on June 9th. Whit heard later it was a discharge. Home by August if he was lucky. The replacement loader was Private Declan Rourke, 19 years old. Red hair and freckles and eyes that burned with something darker than youth. Declan was Patterson's nephew. "I asked for this assignment," Declan had said when he reported. His voice was steady, but Whit could hear the rage underneath it banked like coals waiting for air. "I heard what you said about fighting different. I want to learn." Whit had studied the kid, saw his uncle's jawline, saw the same determination, saw something else too. Grief turned to purpose. Dangerous, that, but useful. "You follow orders?" Whit asked. "Yes, Sergeant." "Even when you don't understand them?" Declan hesitated. "Then Uncle Pat said you were the best tanker in the platoon, said you thought like a mechanic, not a soldier. He meant it as a compliment." Whit grunted. "Your uncle was a good man. Book smart, brave. Got himself killed being both." "I know." "You here for revenge?" The kid's jaw tightened. "I'm here to make sure Germans stop laughing when they kill us." Whit nodded slowly. "Good enough. You're in." The driver was still Silas Crane, 23, married with a baby daughter he'd never met. Photographs of his wife Margaret covered the inside of his hatch. Before the war, Silas had raced stock cars in North Carolina. He drove the 30-ton Sherman like it was built for a dirt track. "You staying with me?" Whit had asked him. Silas had just shrugged. "Figured if I'm going to die in this steel coffin, might as well be with someone who makes sense of it." Then quieter. "Besides, you pulled Jasper out, didn't leave him." The radio operator was new too. Private Roscoe Talbot, 26, from a farm in Iowa so remote it made Appalachia look cosmopolitan. Tall, raw-boned, with the kind of slow drawl that made people underestimate him. He had a gift for radio work, though. Could tune a set faster than most men could tie their boots. "You speak German?" Whit had asked during the introduction. "No, Sergeant, just English, and poorly, my ma used to say." "Good. Listen to their radio traffic anyway. You'll figure out what matters." Roscoe had nodded, clearly confused, but willing. The crew was assembled. The plan was forming. All Whit needed now was permission. June 11th, 1900 hours. The command tent smelled like coffee grounds and cigarette smoke. Captain Riley sat behind a folding table covered in maps, his face grey with exhaustion. 2 weeks past D-Day, and the bocage was eating them alive. "Absolutely not," Riley said before Witt even finished talking. "Sir," "I said no, Sergeant. We're holding defensive positions. Our orders are to secure this sector, not go hunting for panthers like you're on some personal vendetta." Witt kept his voice level. "Intelligence says a Panther Platoon is moving through the sunken lane near St. Lo tomorrow at dawn. 3 tanks. If we let them through, they'll reinforce Hill 192 and we'll be digging them out for weeks. If the intelligence is good, which it usually isn't." Riley rubbed his eyes. "I've got 15 operational Shermans left in this company, Brennan. 15. I started with 42. I'm not throwing away more tanks on a maybe." "It's not a maybe. Radio intercepts confirm." "Radio intercepts confirm. Jack squat. Germans know we listen. Half the traffic is deception." Riley stood planting his hands on the table. "Look, I know what happened to Patterson. I know Declan Rourke is his nephew. I know you're carrying that. But this is war, not a Western. You don't get to round up a posse and ride out for revenge." Witt met his eyes. "This isn't revenge, sir. It's tactics." "Tactics?" Riley laughed bitter. "You want tactics? Here's tactics. We lost 3,000 tanks in the last week. 3,000. The Germans, maybe 200. You know why? Because we keep doing exactly what you're proposing. We keep attacking. We keep pushing. We keep getting blown to pieces by guns that outrange us by half a mile." "Not in the bocage." "What?" "In the bocage range doesn't matter. Visibility's 30 yards. Those Panthers can't use their advantages, but we can use ours." Riley stared at him. "Numbers. That's your advantage. Throw more Shermans at them until we get lucky." "No, sir. Patience. Positioning. The ground itself." Witt pulled out a hand-drawn map, crude but detailed. "This sunken lane, it's narrow, 8 feet wide maybe, hedgerows on both sides 10 feet high. A column moving through has to go single file, can't see more than 20 yards ahead, can't turn around, can't deploy. If we position here, here, and here—" He tapped the map. "We hit them from 3 angles before they know we're there." Riley studied the map. For a moment, Witt thought he saw consideration in the captain's eyes. Then Riley shook his head. "And if you're wrong, if they come a different route, if there are 4 Panthers, not 3, if they have infantry support, then we pull back." "You pull back after you've abandoned your defensive position without orders, after you've taken 4 tanks out of the line." Riley crumpled the map and tossed it back. "Request denied. You hold your assigned sector. That's an order." Witt stood there for 3 long seconds, looked at the map, looked at Riley. "Yes, sir," he said finally. He walked out of the tent into the gathering dark. Roscoe was waiting by the Sherman cleaning his radio set. Jasper sat on the hull smoking a cigarette with hands that still trembled slightly. Declan was loading ammunition, his movements angry and precise. Silas leaned against the track, studying a photograph of his wife in the last light. They all looked up when Witt approached. "What'd he say?" Declan asked. Witt was quiet for a moment. Thought about Patterson burning. Thought about the German laughter on the radio. Thought about those hedgerows waiting. "He said, 'Hold position,'" Witt finally answered. Jasper's face fell. Declan cursed under his breath. Silas just nodded, resigned. Witt looked at each of them in turn. "He also didn't say what position we should hold." Understanding dawned slowly. Silas straightened. Jasper's cigarette stopped halfway to his mouth. Declan's eyes went wide. "Sarge," Roscoe said slowly, "are you saying what I think you're saying?" Witt pulled out the crumpled map, smoothing it against the Sherman's hull. "I'm saying we've got 12 hours to get into position. I'm saying if anyone wants out, now's the time. No judgment. This isn't an order. It's a choice." "Court-martial," Jasper whispered. "They'll court-martial us." "If we live long enough." Witt met his eyes. "But those Panthers killed Patterson, killed Roberts, Killed 40 other good men in the last week. Tomorrow they'll kill 40 more unless someone stops them. He paused. I'm stopping them. You coming or not? Declan didn't hesitate. I'm in. Silas looked at Margaret's photograph one more time, then tucked it away. Margaret would tell me I'm an idiot. But yeah, I'm in. Roscoe shrugged. Don't know much about tank fighting, Sarge, but I know right from stupid, and this feels right. So I guess I'm in too. They all looked at Jasper. The gunner's hands were shaking worse now. He stared at the cigarette between his fingers, watching it tremble. I froze last time, he said quietly. When Patterson got hit, I froze. Couldn't pull the trigger fast enough. I know, Whit said. What if I freeze again? Then I'll pull it for you. Jasper looked up, searched Whit's face for something. Found it, maybe. He crushed the cigarette under his boot. Patterson taught me gunnery, he said. Said I had the steadiest hands in the division. He held them up, watching them shake. Doesn't feel steady anymore. Steady's not about your hands, Whit said. It's about your head. You trust me? Yeah. Then I'm telling you tomorrow your hands will work. Because tomorrow we're not reacting. We're hunting. And hunters don't shake. Jasper nodded slowly, breathed out. Some of the tension left his shoulders. Okay, I'm in. Whit looked at his crew. 4 men, 1 Sherman, 1 chance. Then let's move. They rolled out at 2200 hours, engines off, towed by another Sherman until they were half a mile from the defensive line, then released. Silas fired up the engine, and they moved through the darkness using moonlight and memory. Marcel met them at a crossroads, a phantom in the night. He guided them to the sunken lane, showed them the exact positions Whit had mapped, then disappeared back into the bocage like smoke. Whit positioned the Shermans with the precision of a farmer laying irrigation lines. His tank in the centre, hull down behind a slight rise in the lane. Lieutenant Carson's Sherman to the left, hidden behind a break in the hedgerow. 2 more Shermans behind and to the right, creating overlapping fields of fire. They cut the engines. Waited. The night was alive with sounds, insects, distant artillery, the creak of cooling metal. Inside the Sherman, Roscoe fiddled with the radio set, adjusting frequencies. He'd been listening to German traffic all evening, picking up patterns even without understanding the words. Sarge, he whispered. They're still coming. I can hear the radio discipline. They're not worried. They're confident. Good, Whit said. Confidence makes you slow. Declan was checking ammunition for the 20th time. Armor-piercing. High explosive. Smoke. Each round carefully examined, carefully positioned for maximum loading speed. His hands moved with controlled fury. Declan, Whit said quietly. The kid looked up. When it starts, it'll be fast. You'll want to rush. Don't. Smooth is fast. Understand? Yes, Sergeant. And if something happens to me, you follow Jasper's orders. He's next in command. Declan glanced at the gunner, who sat hunched over his sight, breathing slowly. He okay? He will be. Whit leaned forward. Jasper. The gunner didn't look up. Yeah, Sarge. You remember that Panther? The one at Carentan. How could I forget? You remember where you aimed. Frontal armor. Dead center. Like the manual says. And the shell bounced. Jasper's voice was hollow. Didn't even scratch the paint. That's because you were following the manual. The manual's written for flat ground, open terrain, tank on tank at 1,000 yards. Whit tapped the side of the Sherman. Tomorrow, they'll be 30 yards away. Maybe less. You're not aiming for frontal armor. You're aiming for the side, the rear, the turret ring, anywhere the armor's thin. Jasper finally looked up. "And if I miss—" "You won't." "How do you know?" "Because you're not the same gunner you were 5 days ago. That gunner was following rules. Tomorrow's gunner makes them." In the driver's compartment, Silas carved one more line into the shell casing he'd been working on for 3 days. Margaret's name was there painstakingly etched. And now beneath it, a single word: tomorrow. "Silas!" Whit called forward. "Yes, Sarge. When I say move, I don't mean eventually, I mean now. These Panthers turn fast. We stay still, we die." "Got it. In and out. Like dodging at the dirt track. Except the other cars are shooting at you." Silas laughed quietly. "Hell, Sarge. That's just Saturday night in Carolina." The hours crawled. Midnight, 100, 200. Whit wrote another letter to his mother sitting in the commander's hatch with a pen light and that same stub of pencil. This one was different. No goodbye, no sentimentality. No, "Ma, the south field needs rotating. Soybeans next year, not corn. Trust me on this. The earth knows. Listen to it." He folded it, put it with the others. 24 letters. This one might actually get sent. At 0400, Roscoe's hand shot up. "Sarge, radio traffic, German, it's them." "How do you know?" "Voice pattern, same one from yesterday, and the day before. It's the commander. He's talking about I don't know the words, but he sounds happy. Laughing." Whit felt something cold settle in his chest. "He's bragging. About what? About how many Ronsons he's going to burn today." Jasper's hands tightened on the gun controls. Declan's jaw clenched. Silas breathed out slowly. Whit pulled on his helmet, adjusted his throat mic. Across the radio net, he heard Carson's voice, steady and professional. "Red 2 in position." The other 2 Shermans checked in. Red 3, Red 4. All waiting. All hidden. All aimed at the kill zone. Whit keyed his mic. "Red 1. Nobody fires until I give the word. I don't care what you see. I don't care what they do. We wait for the perfect shot." "Understood." 3 confirmations crackled back. The sky began to lighten. 0500. Dawn wasn't far now. The fog would lift with the sun, but not quickly. They'd have maybe an hour of reduced visibility, maybe less. At 0530, Roscoe held up a hand. "Engine sounds, north, maybe half a mile." "How many?" Roscoe closed his eyes, listening through the headset. 3. Heavy. Gotta be Panthers." Whit felt his heartbeat slow. Felt the world narrow to this lane, this moment, this choice he'd made 12 hours ago that couldn't be unmade. "Positions," he said quietly. Jasper settled behind the gun sight. Declan crouched by the ammunition rack, hand hovering over the first shell. Silas's foot rested on the throttle, ready. Roscoe monitored the radio, one hand on the transmitter. The engine sounds grew louder, closer, the rumble of diesel and steel grinding through the morning. Whit looked down at the letter in his helmet, thought about his mother, thought about the farm, thought about the earth and patience and the way a good trap was just a matter of waiting for the right moment. Through the vision slit he saw the first Panther nose into view, 200 yards, then 150, then 100. Massive, deadly, beautiful in a terrible way. The long gun barrel swept the lane ahead, searching. The commander's hatch was open. A man in a black uniform stood half exposed, scanning the hedgerows. Not today, Whit thought. The Panther advanced, 75 yards, 50. The second Panther appeared behind it, then the third. Single file, boxed in by hedgerows. Exactly as Whit had predicted, exactly as Marcel had promised, exactly as the earth allowed. Whit keyed the radio. His voice was steady, farmer calm. the voice of a man who'd waited through entire growing seasons for the right weather. "Hold," he said. "Hold, hold." The lead panther was 30 yards away now, close enough to see the mud on its tracks, close enough to hear its crew talking inside, close enough to hear them laughing. Witt's hand tightened on the radio transmitter. "Now," he said, and the hedgerows erupted in fire. The first shell left Lieutenant Carson's Sherman with a sound like thunder compressed into a single syllable. The 75mm gun bucked. Smoke and flame belched from the muzzle. For one suspended moment the world held its breath. Then the shell struck home. Panther number 2, the middle tank in the German column, shuddered as armor-piercing steel punched through its right track. Metal screamed. The track separated with a sound like a giant chain breaking. The 45-ton machine lurched sideways momentum, carrying it half into the hedgerow before grinding to a halt. Immobilized, but not dead. Inside, the lead Panther Hauptmann Klaus Vosberg's head snapped around. 1 second he'd been scanning empty hedgerows. The next, his world was chaos. His gunner was already traversing the turret hunting for targets, but there was nothing. Just smoke, just fog, just the green wall of vegetation that revealed nothing. "Links! Links!" Vosberg shouted. "Left! Somewhere left!" His gunner fired blind into the hedgerow where the muzzle flash had been. The Panther's long gun roared. The shell tore through leaves and earth and air, missing Carson's Sherman by 6 feet. Dirt erupted. Branches disintegrated. The hedgerow seemed to explode, but when the smoke cleared, there was still no target. Witt keyed his radio. His voice was ice. "Jasper, side shot, Panther 1, fire when ready." Jasper's hands found the controls. The trembling was still there. Would always be there now. But Witt's words from the night before echoed in his head. "Hunters don't shake." He breathed out, found the sight picture. The lead Panther's flank was exposed at an angle just visible through a gap in the hedgerow. Not frontal armor, side, where the steel was thinner, where a Sherman's gun could bite. Jasper squeezed the trigger. The gun roared. The Sherman rocked backward from recoil. Through the smoke, Jasper saw the shell impact just below the Panther's turret ring. Sparks flew. The German tank jerked. Not a clean penetration, but enough. The track mechanism shattered. The Panther slewed left, grinding to a halt. 2 Panthers immobilized, 1 still mobile. Inside, Witt's Sherman Declan already had the next shell halfway to the breach. His hands moved on muscle memory and fury. Load, slam, ready. The mechanical rhythm his uncle had drilled into him before Carentan, before the burning. Vosberg's voice crackled over the German radio frequency. Roscoe couldn't understand the words, but he understood the tone. Rage, shock, the confidence bleeding out. "He's calling for the 3rd Panther to advance," Roscoe said, guessing from inflection. Witt saw it happen. Panther number 3, the rear tank still mobile, began pushing forward. The commander was trying to get past the disabled tanks, trying to bring his gun to bear on whatever was shredding his platoon from the shadows. It was the wrong move. "Red 4, Witt called over the radio. "Rear target, fire!" The 4th Sherman, positioned behind and to the right, had a perfect angle on Panther 3's engine deck. The weakest armor, where the steel was measured in inches, not feet. The shell flew true. Impact. Penetration. Smoke began pouring from the Panther's engine compartment. The tank kept moving for 3 more seconds, then slowed. Black smoke turned grey. Grey turned white. Oil burning. Fuel lines ruptured. The Panther was dying, but it was still dangerous. Its turret traversed. Found Red 4's position. The German gunner was good, trained, Eastern Front veteran. He saw the muzzle flash and put a shell exactly where it originated. Red 4's Sherman took the hit on its frontal glacis. The armor held, barely. The crew inside felt the impact like a car crash. Metal sang, rivets popped. But the tank survived. Then Panther 3 fired again. This time it wasn't Red 4 in the crosshairs. It was Carson. Lieutenant Carson had repositioned after his first shot, pulling back to reload shifting angles. Standard tactics, smart tactics. But in the chaos of smoke and hedgerows, he'd exposed his left side for just 3 seconds. 3 seconds was all it took. The Panther's shell crossed 30 yards and struck Carson's Sherman just behind the turret. The angle was perfect. The penetration was catastrophic. The shell went through the armor and into the fighting compartment and found the ammunition racks that every tanker knew were death waiting to happen. The Sherman exploded from the inside out. Witt saw it through his periscope, saw the flash, saw the turret lift on a column of flame, saw the hatches burst open and something that might have been a man try to climb out before the secondary explosion pulled everything back down into the inferno. The radio came alive with screaming. Not words, just sound. Human sound. The sound men make when they're burning alive and there's nowhere to go and no way to stop it. Then silence. Declan froze. His hand was on a shell halfway to the breach, but his whole body had locked up. He stared at nothing. Saw everything. Uncle Patterson's tank burning at Carentan. Now Carson burning here. Different men. Same fire. Same screams. Declan! Witt's voice cut through. Load. The kid didn't move. Declan! Load the damn gun or we die too. Something in Witt's tone broke through. Declan's hands started moving again. Mechanical, disconnected from the brain. Load, slam, ready. His lips were moving. Witt couldn't hear what he was saying. Probably prayers, maybe curses, maybe both. Jasper already had Panther 1 in his sights again. The lead German tank track damaged turret still operational, gun still deadly. Vosberg was trying to turn the turret to face this new threat, but the turret traverse was hydraulic and slow, and he didn't know exactly where to aim. Fire, Witt said. Jasper fired. The shell flew, missed, hit the hedgerow behind the Panther. Earth and vegetation erupted. Adjust left, Witt said, voice steady. Fire again. But Declan had grabbed the wrong shell. In his panic, in his fugue state, his hand had found high explosive instead of armor-piercing. He slammed it into the breach before Jasper could check. Ready, Declan called. Jasper fired. The shell left the barrel, and in that instant he knew something was wrong. The sound was different. The trajectory was different. High explosive wasn't made for penetrating armor. It was made for infantry, for buildings, for anything except tank-on-tank combat. The shell hit Panther 1's turret and exploded on contact. Flame washed over the German tank's exterior. Hatches rattled. But the armor held. No penetration, no kill, just noise. Wrong shell, Jasper shouted. He loaded, he... Vosberg's gunner had found them now. The Panther's gun was traversing, lining up. Witt could see it through the vision slit, could see the long barrel swinging toward them like the finger of death pointing. Silas reversed now. Silas's foot slammed the throttle. The Sherman's engine screamed. The tank lurched backward tracks, throwing mud. They cleared the position just as the Panther fired. The shell hit Earth where they'd been 2 seconds earlier. The explosion was massive. Shrapnel rattled against their hull like hail. If they'd been slower, if Silas had hesitated even 1 second, they'd be burning like Carson. Left, Witt called. Get us to the secondary position. Silas drove like he was back on the Carolina dirt tracks, throwing the Sherman around terrain that should have been impossible to navigate. The tank crashed through thin hedgerow, bounced over ruts, slewed sideways in mud. But it moved. It survived. Declan, Witt snapped. Next round, armor piercing. Check the shell before you load. Sorry, Sarge, I'm sorry. I don't want sorry, I want the right damn shell. Declan's hands found the AP round. This time he looked. Confirmed. Loaded it with shaking precision. Ready. They were in a new position now, 20 yards from where they'd been. The Panther was still turning, still searching. Vosburg knew they were close, but the bocage made everything a guessing game. The Americans could be anywhere. Jasper found the sight picture. Side armor again. The damaged track meant the Panther couldn't turn its hull to face them. Only the turret moved, and it was pointing the wrong direction. Fire, Witt said. This time the shell was right. This time the aim was true. This time the range was perfect. The armor-piercing round struck Panther I's turret ring. The weakest point. Where the turret met the hull. Where the armor was thin enough that even a Sherman's gun could punch through. The penetration was surgical. The shell went through the turret ring and into the fighting compartment. Inside it found ammunition, found fuel, found everything that makes a tank into a bomb. Panther I exploded. The turret hatch blew open. Flame shot 15 feet into the air. Smoke poured from every opening. The commander's hatch, the machine gun port, the driver's visor. Everything became an exit for the fire that couldn't be contained. 2 men managed to climb out. They were already burning. They fell from the hull and rolled in the mud, trying to extinguish flames that had turned their uniforms into fuel. One stopped moving after 5 seconds. The other kept rolling, kept screaming. Witt looked away, looked at his crew. Jasper's face was white. Declan was crying silently, tears cutting tracks through the grime on his face. Roscoe had his eyes closed, lips moving in prayer. Silas just stared ahead, hands on the controls ready to move again. 1 down, Witt said quietly. 2 to go. Panther. 2 Vosburg's tank was still immobilized in the middle of the lane. Track destroyed, hull cant. But the turret worked. The gun worked. And Vosburg was a veteran. Eastern Front. Kursk. Dozens of kills. He knew what he was doing. The Panther's gun traversed methodically, firing at muzzle flashes, at smoke, at anything that might be a target. 1 round punched through a hedgerow and kept going. Another hit Red 4's frontal armor again, this time cracking the plate. A third found nothing but empty earth. Vosburg was firing blind, but he was firing smart, creating suppression, making the Americans keep their heads down while he figured out his next move. Panther III was still burning but not dead. The engine fire had stabilized into thick smoke. The turret still moved. The crew was still fighting. The driver was trying to reverse, trying to get out of the kill zone, but the damaged engine had no power. The tank crawled backward at walking speed. Red 4 fired again. The shell hit Panther III's turret. Bounced. The range was bad. The angle was worse. The shot that should have killed only made noise. Vosburg's gunner saw the flash. Traversed. Fired. Red 4 took the hit on its side. Penetration. The Sherman shuddered. Went silent. Witt watched for movement. Waited for hatches to open. Waited for men to bail out. Nothing. Just smoke. Just a tank that had been alive and now wasn't. 2 Shermans down. 2 Panthers damaged. 1 Panther still operational. The math wasn't good. Red 3, Witt called over the radio. Target Panther 3, engine deck, fire. Red 3. The remaining Sherman behind them adjusted aim. Fired. The shell flew true. Hit Panther III's engine compartment dead center. This time the damage was catastrophic. The fuel tank ruptured. Diesel sprayed. Found sparks. Found heat. The Panther exploded in a fireball that turned morning fog into day. The hatches blew. The turret shifted. Ammunition cooked off in a chain reaction that sounded like a string of firecrackers made from howitzer shells. Nobody got out of that one. Now it was Witt's Sherman and Red 3 against Vosberg's immobilized Panther 2, 1-on-1. Except Vosberg had the bigger gun, the thicker armor, the better optics, and he was angry. The Panther's gun traversed toward Red 3's last position, found it, fired. The shell hit the earth 5 feet from Red 3's hull, close enough that shrapnel tore through the track. Red 3 was immobilized now too, still able to fight but couldn't move. Witt keyed the radio. Red 3, fall back to secondary position if you can. We'll take point. Can't move Red 1. Track's gone. Then stay low. We'll finish this. Inside Witt's Sherman, Jasper had his eye pressed to the gun sight. But his hands were shaking again, worse than before. The explosion, the burning men, the screaming. It was all too much, too familiar. Quarantan all over again. His right hand trembled so badly he couldn't keep the crosshairs steady. "Sarge," he whispered. I can't do it." Witt looked at him, saw the kid who'd been knocked unconscious at Quarantan, saw the blood, saw the trauma written in every shake. "Jasper," Witt said quietly, "you did good. You got us this far. I can't finish it. My hands won't." "I know." Witt unstrapped from the commander's position, started climbing down into the cramped fighting compartment. "Switch with me." "What? I'm taking the gun. You spot for me." "Sarge, you're not trained for—" "I built these mechanisms in Detroit, tested them. Know every gear, every hydraulic line, every tolerance. I can pull a trigger as well as anyone." Witt settled into the gunner's seat. It was cramped, not made for his frame, but it would do. "Now, tell me where to aim." Jasper climbed up to the commander's position, hands still shaking, but relieved. He put his eye to the periscope, scanned, found Vosberg's Panther through the smoke and fog. 11 o'clock, 100 yards, hull down. You can see the turret, just the turret. Witt found the sight picture. The Panther's turret filled his vision, thick armor, angled, a bad shot from this position. But the hull was hidden by earth. The side armor wasn't visible. All he had was the turret face, a frontal shot, the worst shot, the shot that got men killed. "Wait," Jasper said. "He's turning. Turret's traversing. He's looking for us." Witt watched through the sight, saw the Panther's gun barrel swing left, right, searching. In 30 seconds it would point directly at them. And when it did, Vosberg would fire. And at this range, frontal armor or not, the Panther's gun would punch through. "Suggestions?" Witt asked. "We can't penetrate his turret face. Not from here. We need side armor, rear armor, anything but this." "Silas," Witt called forward, "can you give me a different angle?" "Not without exposing our side. He'll kill us before I can turn." Witt's mind worked like gears meshing, like hydraulics flowing, like the machinery he understood better than warfare. The Panther couldn't move, fixed position, but it could rotate its turret. Witt's Sherman could move, but moving meant exposure. Exposure meant death. Unless... "Declan," Witt said. "Load smoke. Smoke, Sarge, we need. Load smoke. Now." Declan grabbed a smoke shell, loaded it. "Ready." Witt aimed at the ground directly in front of the Panther. Not at the tank. At the earth. He fired. The smoke shell hit burst, and white phosphorus bloomed like a chemical flower. In 3 seconds, the entire area around Vosberg's tank was obscured in thick white smoke. Silas moved right fast. Silas gunned the engine. The Sherman lurched right parallel to the hedgerow, closing distance with the Panther, but from a different angle. They crashed through undergrowth, bounced over roots, 30 yards, 20. Through the smoke, Witt caught glimpses of the Panther's hull. Side armor now, the angle he needed, but the smoke worked both ways. Vosberg couldn't see them, but they couldn't see him clearly either. 15 yards, Jasper called. "Straight ahead, through the smoke. I can see the outline." Witt's hands found the controls, the mechanisms he'd tested 1,000 times in a Detroit factory. Traverse, elevate, the crosshairs wandering through smoke searching for solid shape. There, the Panther's hull, side armor. Below the turret ring, where a 75mm shell might have a chance, Vosburg fired first. The shell came through the smoke like a meteor. Witt saw it for a split second, a dark streak in white fog. It hit their frontal glasses at an angle not quite perpendicular. The physics of war became a matter of degrees. 38 degrees and the shell bounced. 42 degrees and it penetrated. It was 39 degrees. The shell deflected, screamed off the armor in a shower of sparks. The impact threw Witt against the gun mount. His head rang. Blood filled his mouth where he'd bitten his tongue. But the armor held. The tank held. They were still alive. Witt blinked blood from his eyes. Found the sight picture again. The Panther was there, right there. Close enough to see the weld seams, close enough to count rivets. He thought of Patterson burning, of Carson burning, of the men who died because metal and doctrine said they should. He thought of his mother's farm, of patient earth, of harvest. He squeezed the trigger. The gun fired. The Sherman rocked. The shell flew 15 yards through smoke and struck Panther II's side armor 6 inches below the turret ring. It hit at 90 degrees, perfect perpendicular, maximum penetration. The armor cracked. The shell went through, found the interior, found ammunition stored in racks that German engineers had promised were safe, found fuel lines that ran too close to the fighting compartment. The Panther's interior became an inferno in the space between heartbeats. The explosion blew the hatches off. Flame jetted 30 feet into the air. The turret didn't lift, but it might as well have. Everything inside was fire. Everything inside was death. One man made it out. Hauptmann Klaus Vosburg. He came through the commander's hatch, trailing smoke and flame, fell from the hull, rolled, kept rolling. His uniform was burning, his face was burning, but he was alive for now. Witt climbed out of the gunner's seat, climbed up to the commander's hatch, opened it. Fresh air hit his face, smoke and cordite and the smell of burning diesel and something worse, burning flesh, burning hair, burning men. Around them, 3 Panthers burned. 2 Shermans burned. The sunken lane was a graveyard of steel. The time was 6:09 a.m. The battle had lasted 5 minutes. Witt keyed the radio. His voice was hoarse. Red 3. Status. Immobilized but operational. Crew intact. Hold position. Watch for infantry. Roger. Witt looked at his crew. Jasper was crying silently. Declan had vomited in the corner and was now just sitting, staring at nothing. Roscoe had his head in his hands. Silas's hands were locked on the controls, knuckles white. "We did it," Jasper whispered. "We actually did it." Witt didn't answer. He was looking at Carson's burning Sherman, at Red 4's silent hull, at the German survivors crawling from wreckage. Victory felt like ashes. "Sarge." Declan's voice was small, young, broken. "Did Uncle Pat? Did we make it worth it?" Witt looked at the kid, at the tears, at the question that had no good answer. "We stopped them," he said finally. "That's all we can do. We stop them, and we try like hell to survive stopping them." The smoke began to clear. The fog began to lift. And in the growing light of a French summer morning, the true cost of 5 minutes revealed itself in steel and fire and the smell of war. The silence after battle is worse than the noise during it. That's what Whit Brennan learned in the moments after the guns fell quiet. At least during the fighting, the mind has purpose. Target, shoot, move, survive. Simple verbs that keep thought at bay. But afterward, there's nothing to do but look at what you've done. Witt stood in the commander's hatch, surveying the sunken lane. Smoke rose from 5 burning hulks, 3 German, 2 American. The morning breeze carried the smell of diesel fuel and something that used to be men. Around the wrecks, the hedgerows were torn and blackened. Shell holes cratered the earth. Spent brass casings littered the ground like strange seeds. 4 German survivors sat against a hedgerow, hands on heads, guarded by Red 3's crew. One of them was Hauptmann Klaus Vosberg. His face was burned, his uniform was scorched black, but he was alive and conscious, and staring at Witt with eyes that held something between hatred and respect. Witt climbed down from the Sherman. His legs nearly gave out when his boots hit earth. Adrenaline crash. The body's bill coming due for 5 minutes of operating beyond human limits. He steadied himself against the track. Jasper climbed out after him, moving like an old man. Declan followed, still crying silently. Roscoe emerged, blinking in the daylight as if surprised to still be breathing. Silas stayed in the driver's compartment, staring at nothing. Sarge. Red 3's commander, a sergeant named Walsh, approached. Medics are on the way. Command's been notified. They're asking what the hell happened. Tell them we engaged enemy armor. They know that. They want to know why we weren't at our assigned position. Witt looked at Carson's burning Sherman, at the smoke still rising. We were where we needed to be. Walsh followed his gaze, swallowed hard. Carson's crew. Gone, all of them. Red 4. Gone. Witt's voice was flat. Direct penetration. Ammunition cooked off. Nobody got out. A medical jeep arrived, bouncing over the rough ground. 2 corpsmen jumped out and immediately went to the German survivors. Professional, efficient. The wounded were wounded regardless of uniform. Vosberg waved them off, pointing to one of his men who was in worse shape, burned worse, bleeding worse. Witt walked toward the prisoners. Up close, Vosberg was younger than expected, maybe 32, not much older than Witt himself. The Hauptmann watched him approach with eyes that had seen 100 battlefields. "You speak English?" Witt asked. "Yes." Vosberg's voice was rough. Smoke damage. "You are the commander." "Staff Sergeant Brennan." "Staff Sergeant?" Vosberg almost smiled. It looked painful. "Not officer. Interesting. You fought like Prussian general. Patience, terrain, timing." He coughed. "We underestimated you. You called us Ronsons. Over the radio, we heard." Vosberg had the decency to look away. "Propaganda, arrogance. We believed our own myths." He gestured at the burning Panthers. "The result speaks for itself." Witt felt Declan step up beside him. The kid's hands were balled into fists. His whole body vibrated with barely controlled rage. "You killed my uncle. You killed Lieutenant Patterson. June 7th. Carentan." Vosberg looked at Declan, really looked at him, saw the youth, the grief. "I have killed many uncles, many sons, many fathers. You want me to apologize?" He shook his head. "I cannot. I did my duty. You did yours. This is war." "This is murder." Declan spat. "Yes," Vosberg agreed quietly. "It is. On both sides. Every day." Roscoe was searching through the Panther wrecks looking for intelligence, maps, documents, anything. He returned holding a leather satchel, singed but intact. "Sarge, found this in Panther 2. Looks important." Witt opened it. Inside were detailed maps of German defensive positions around St. Lo, troop movements, artillery placements, the entire sector laid out in careful German notation. "These are current?" he asked Vosberg. The Hauptmann met his eyes, said nothing. "I'm asking because this intelligence could save a lot of lives, American lives, but also German lives if it helps end things faster." Vosburgh was quiet for a long moment. Then, current as of yesterday, but outdated already. We were to receive new positions today. After... He gestured at the burning tanks. After this. Why tell me? Because you showed respect. You did not shoot us when we surrendered. You did not mock us when we burned. Vosburgh coughed again harder. And because I am tired. Tired of sending boys to die for a war we cannot win. If these maps end it one day sooner, perhaps some boy in Stuttgart keeps his father. Witt closed the satchel, looked at Declan. Get this to command. Fast. Declan took it, hesitated. Sarge, you're coming too, right? Eventually. They're going to court-martial you for disobeying orders. I know. Was it worth it? Witt looked at the burning Shermans, at Carson's pyre, at Red 4's silent hull. Ask me in 10 years. June 13th, 1944, Division Headquarters. A tent that smelled like canvas and coffee and the accumulated stress of 2 weeks in Normandy. Captain Riley sat behind a folding table. Beside him, a Colonel Witt didn't recognize. Silver eagles on his collar, face like weathered granite. Witt stood at attention, still in his combat uniform, still smelling like smoke and cordite. They hadn't even given him time to clean up. Staff Sergeant Brennan, Riley began. His voice was tight, controlled, angry. You directly disobeyed my orders. You abandoned your defensive position. You took 4 tanks into unsanctioned offensive action. Do you deny this? No, sir. Do you have anything to say in your defense? No, sir. Riley's jaw worked. 3 Panthers destroyed. Intelligence recovered that has already led to successful artillery strikes on German positions. Estimated 200 American lives saved in the hill, 192 assault. He paused. Also 2 Shermans lost, 8 men dead, 4 tanks committed without authorization, a complete breakdown of military discipline. The colonel leaned forward. Captain Riley wants you court-martialed Brennan, and by the book he's right. What you did was insubordination, reckless, dangerous. Yes, sir. It also worked. The colonel opened a folder. I've read the after-action reports, studied the terrain, interviewed the survivors. You used the bocage like a weapon, turned the Germans' advantages into liabilities, got inside their decision cycle. He looked up. Where did you learn that? Detroit, sir. Detroit. Ford Motor Company. I helped design the assembly line for the Sherman. You learn to think in systems, weaknesses, tolerances, where things break under stress. Witt paused. Same principles apply to warfare. The colonel almost smiled. A factory worker teaching panzer commanders how to lose. There's poetry in that. He closed the folder. Here's your punishment, Sergeant. You're going to teach, sir. Every tank commander in this division needs to learn what you did. The tactics, the patience, the terrain exploitation. You've got 2 weeks to train them. After that, you're back in combat. The colonel stood. And Brennan, you ever disobey orders again, I will personally see you spend the rest of this war breaking rocks at Leavenworth. Understood? Yes, sir. Good. Dismissed. Witt saluted, turned to leave. Brennan, the colonel added. Your gunner, Corporal Cole. The medical reports say he's unfit for combat duty. PTSD. Recommend discharge. Witt stopped. He saved my life yesterday, sir. Saved the mission. And now his hands shake so badly he can't hold a fork. You want that man back in a tank. Witt thought of Jasper's trembling fingers, thought of the kid who'd been steady as stone before Carentan. No, sir, I want him home. Safe. Then sign the discharge papers. They're on Captain Riley's desk. For 2 weeks, Witt taught. 32 tank crews, young men mostly, scared men. Men who'd heard about Sherman's burning and Panthers laughing and odds that weren't odds at all, but simple mathematics of murder. He taught them about terrain, about patience, about the difference between courage and stupidity. He walked them through the sunken lanes, showed them angles and sight lines, and the places where hedgerows became allies instead of coffins. Declan became his assistant. The kid had aged 5 years in 5 minutes of combat. The tears were gone now, replaced by something harder. Focus. Purpose. He'd found a way to channel grief into teaching others how to survive. Jasper left on June 16th. Medical discharge. Honourable. He shook Whit's hand in front of the aid station, tears streaming down his face. "I'm sorry, Sarge. I'm sorry I couldn't finish it." "You finished it fine. Got us to the end. That's all that matters." "My hands won't stop shaking." "I know. Maybe they never will. But you're alive to shake them. That's not nothing." Jasper climbed into the truck that would take him to the coast, to a ship, to home. Whit watched him go and felt something close to envy. The new gunner was a corporal named Mills, steady, experienced, not as intuitive as Jasper had been, but competent. Good enough. Roscoe stayed on radio. Silas stayed on driver. Declan stayed as loader, though Whit had offered to transfer him to training staff permanently. "No, sir," Declan had said. "Uncle Pat died fighting. I'll honour that by fighting better." July 25th, 1944. Operation Cobra. The breakout from St. Lo. 2,000 American bombers turned the sky black. The earth shook, German lines shattered, and through the gap poured armour, tanks by the hundreds. Shermans using the tactics Whit had taught, flanking, positioning, patience over aggression. Whit's platoon led one of the breakthrough columns. 4 Shermans now designated Red 1 through Red 4 again. New crews in the replacements, but the same doctrine, the same methods. They encountered another Panther Platoon on the outskirts of St. Lo. 3 tanks, different commanders, but the same overconfidence, the same reliance on steel and firepower. Whit used the same tactics. Ambush, multiple angles, patience. 2 Panthers destroyed in 3 minutes. The third retreated. 0 American casualties. It worked. The method worked. All across the sector, Sherman crews were winning battles they should have lost. Not because their tanks got better, because they fought smarter. Whit felt something approaching vindication. It lasted 4 hours. At 15:30 hours, pushing through the ruins of a village, they took artillery fire. Not tanks, not machine guns. Artillery, random, impersonal. A German battery 5 miles away firing at coordinates on a map, not at men they could see. The shell landed 6 feet from Whit's Sherman. The explosion threw the tank sideways. Shrapnel tore through the right track, through the engine compartment, through the driver's compartment. Silas Crane died instantly. No warning, no chance to bail, no final words. 1 second he was there, hands on the controls, Margaret's photograph tucked above his head. The next second he was gone. Just gone. Whit felt the impact, felt the Sherman shudder, heard Declan scream, smelled blood and cordite and diesel mixing in the air. "Bail! Bail! Bail!" They scrambled out. Declan pulled Whit from the commander's hatch. Mills and Roscoe came through the side hatches, but the driver's compartment was silent. Whit tried to reach in, tried to pull Silas out, but Declan held him back. "He's gone, Sarge. He's gone. We gotta move." More artillery shells fell. They ran, left the Sherman burning, left Silas inside, ran to a crater and dove in and waited for the barrage to end. When silence finally came, Whit crawled back. The Sherman was still burning but contained. Not the massive explosion of ammunition, just fire, just heat, just death. He couldn't get to the driver's compartment. The metal was too hot. The smoke was too thick. Declan tried to pull him back again, but Whit shook him off. "His effects," Whit said. His voice sounded like gravel. "I need his effects. For Margaret." "Sarge, we can't." "I need them." A recovery crew arrived an hour later. They pulled Silas's body from the wreck, pulled the photograph that had somehow survived, pulled the shell casing with Margaret's name carved on it. Whit took them both, held them, stared at the photograph of a woman he'd never met and a baby girl who would grow up without her father. Declan sat next to him in the crater, put a hand on his shoulder, said nothing. There was nothing to say. That night, in a field hospital where they'd sent Whit for shrapnel wounds he barely remembered getting, he wrote the letter. August 15th, 1944, somewhere in France. Whit sat on a cot in a hospital tent, leg bandaged, ribs taped, hand cramped from writing. The letter to Margaret Crane had taken 6 drafts. 6 attempts to find words that could somehow carry the weight of a husband's death to a wife who'd never even met him in person. They'd married 2 weeks before his deployment. 2 weeks, then war. Then nothing but letters and photographs and promises about after. There was no after for Silas. Whit's final version was simple, direct, the way Silas had been. Dear Mrs. Crane, your husband Silas was the best driver in the European theatre. Steady hands, cool head. He drove our tank like he was racing on Carolina dirt tracks, and he kept us alive through battles that killed better men. I'm sorry I couldn't bring him home. I'm sorry I couldn't save him this time. I'm just sorry. Ran out. Artillery. Not even the enemy seeing him. Just mathematics and coordinates and chance. He died instantly. He did not suffer. I need you to know that even though I know it doesn't help, I'm enclosing the shell casing he carved your name on. He showed it to me once. Said, every shot's for her. He meant it. Every battle we fought, he was fighting to get home to you. The army will send you the medals, the flag, the official condolences. Those are important, but I wanted you to have this too. The thing he made with his own hands. The thing that mattered to him. I'm sorry I couldn't bring him home. I'm sorry I couldn't save him the 7th time. I'm just sorry. Staff Sergeant Whitaker Brennan. He sealed the envelope, attached the shell casing, handed it to a chaplain who promised it would reach North Carolina. Then he lay back on the cot and stared at the tent ceiling and tried to remember what Silas's last words had been. Tried to remember if there'd been anything profound, anything meaningful. But there hadn't been. Silas's last words had been, "Roads clear ahead, Sarge." Just doing his job. Right up until the moment he couldn't. November 1945. Appalachia. The farm where Whit Brennan had learned about patience and earth and the way things grow when you give them time. He'd been home for 3 months. Medical discharge. Too many wounds. Too much shrapnel still working its way to the surface. The doctors said he'd live, but he'd limp. He'd hurt. He'd carry France in his bones for the rest of his life. His mother didn't ask many questions, just looked at him with eyes that knew what war did to young men. Fed him. Let him work the fields at his own pace. Let him heal in silence. Whit didn't talk about it. Not to her. Not to anyone. The letters to Margaret had been the last words he'd written about the war. After that, silence seemed more honest. But on a grey November morning, he got in his truck and drove 6 hours to a place he'd been avoiding, the National Cemetery outside Lexington, where they'd buried the ones who made it home. He found Patterson's grave first, simple white stone, name, rank, date of death, June 7th, 1944. Nothing about how he'd burned. Nothing about the screaming, just facts. Whit placed a small stone on top of the marker, a tradition Roscoe had taught him. Jewish custom. It said, "I was here, I remember." Carson's grave was 3 rows over. Same stone, same silence. Another stone placed. Silas Crane's was in the newer section. Fresh earth. Grass not yet fully grown. Margaret had chosen the inscription, "Beloved husband and father, gone too soon." Whit stood there for a long time, held the photograph he'd carried since July. Silas and Margaret on their wedding day. 2 weeks before deployment. 2 weeks of happiness before everything ended. He placed it against the stone, placed another rock on top. "You should have seen her," a voice said behind him. Whit turned. Jasper Cole stood there, older looking than he should be. The scar on his forehead had faded, but not disappeared. His hands hung at his sides, still and steady now. Time had done what war couldn't, given him peace. "Jasper." "Sarge." Jasper's smile was sad. "Or just Whit, I guess. We're civilians now." "What are you doing here?" "Same as you. Visiting the ones who didn't make it." Jasper gestured at Patterson's grave. "I come every month, talk to him, tell him about things, stupid things, baseball scores, weather. He always liked knowing things." They stood in silence for a moment, 2 survivors among stones. "I teach now," Jasper said finally. "Fort Knox, armored training. They wanted someone who'd use the tactics, your tactics. They call it Brennan's method in the manual now. I didn't invent anything, just used common sense. Common sense that saved lives. 400 crews trained so far. Letters from families thanking me, thanking you." Jasper paused. "You should be proud." "I'm tired." "I know." Jasper looked at Silas's grave. "But tired beats dead." Whit almost laughed. "Almost. That's a low bar. It's the only bar that matters." They walked through the cemetery together, past rows of white stones, past names and dates and the accumulated weight of a generation. At the gate, Jasper stopped. "You know what Patterson told me once?" he asked. "Before Carentan. He said, the best tankers aren't the bravest. They're the ones who make sure everyone comes home. You did that, Sarge. Not every time, but more than most. Not enough." Never enough, but something." Jasper extended his hand. "Thank you for pulling me out, for teaching me, for giving me a reason to keep fighting when I wanted to quit." Whit shook it. "You did the same for me." Jasper left in a Buick that looked too civilian, too normal, too far from war. Whit stood at the cemetery gate and looked back at the stones, at the silence, at the cost of 5 minutes in a sunken lane that had rippled outward into doctrine and training and lives saved in battles he'd never see. He thought about Vosberg's words. This is war, on both sides, every day. He thought about Carson burning, Patterson burning, Silas dying to mathematics and steel. He thought about the letter he'd written to his mother from that Sherman 24 letters ago, about the south field and crop rotation and the patient earth. He drove home, limping, hurting, carrying France in his bones, but home nonetheless. The title cards would appear here in a film, white text on black, facts that couldn't be spoken, only shown. The Brennan method of terrain exploitation and coordinated ambush became official U.S. Army armored doctrine in 1945. It remained in training manuals until 1952. An estimated 2,000 American tank crew lives were saved through its application in the European theatre. Staff Sergeant Whittaker Brennan refused all promotions and commendations. He returned to farming in Appalachia and never spoke publicly about the war. On March 14, 1951, Whittaker Brennan died in a tractor accident on his family farm. He was 35 years old. The three Panthers destroyed near Saint-Lô on June 12, 1944, were the first of 63 German tanks knocked out in that sector using his tactics. Corporal Jasper Cole taught armoured warfare at Fort Knox until 1968. He trained over 3,000 tank crews, many of whom served in Korea and Vietnam. Private Declan Rourke survived the war and became a high school mathematics teacher. He named his first son Patterson. Hauptmann Klaus Vosberg survived his wounds and spent the remainder of the war in a POW camp in Arkansas. He returned to Germany in 1947 and resumed teaching. He died in 1979. Margaret Crane never remarried. She raised her daughter Emily alone. The shell casing with her name still sits on her mantle. In 1984, the sunken lane near Saint-Lô was designated a historical site. A small plaque marks the location. It reads, "Here on June 12, 1944, American ingenuity overcame superior firepower. 5 men in a Sherman tank proved that victory belongs not to the strongest, but to the smartest." The plaque does not mention the cost. It does not mention the burning. It does not mention that the man who proved it never wanted credit. It only mentions that it happened, and sometimes that has to be enough.